This is Partners in Crime with Adam Croft and...
Not the other one. Hello, welcome to a very special episode of Partners in Crime. A little bit of housekeeping before we kick things off, because the more eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed we've not actually been here for the past week or two, mainly because Bob's been nobbing about with Ian McKellen. He's got new friends now, apparently, and I've been frantically trying to finish off the nursery ahead of my daughter's arrival in a few days' time, which somehow led me on to decorating the kitchen last week instead. I'm still not entirely sure how that happened, so I'm not going to attempt to explain it, but like I say, my daughter is due to arrive in the world within the next few days, so this is likely to be the last episode of Partners in Crime for a couple of weeks. But don't worry, because we will be back once the sleep deprivation has cleared sufficiently for me to remember my own name. Now, we couldn't just leave things hanging there, and I did promise you that this week's episode would be a special one. And it is, because if you're a long-term listener to Partners in Crime, you might remember episode 25 from way back in July 2018, more than 3 years ago, when Bob and I interviewed David Mark, the international best-selling author of the D.S. Echte McAvoy series. I think I got the inflection right there. And in that interview, David briefly alluded to some of the troubles he had spent his life living with. He's since released his first non-fiction work, Peace of Mind, in which he gives an excruciatingly honest account of living with acute mental illness. And I'm delighted to say David joins me on the show now. Hello, David.
Hello, mate.
How are you doing?
That's always a loaded question, isn't it?
I was going to say, probably not one to throw in.
Yeah, how do you answer a question like that? Good Lord. I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm more interested to hear you've got a daughter on the way. That is a recipe for lifelong mental illness, mate. So, good for you. She'll be wonderful, and you will spend your whole life with access to just levels of delight and pleasure and glory and grace, and also be terrified for her every breath forever. So good luck with that.
Well,
I have many
I've given
daughters,
up hope on my son. I've given up hope on my son. He's going on for 5 now, so we've failed here. We thought we'd try again.
He doesn't need you. He's fine. To be honest, once you get a lad to about 3, they've got the personality that will see them through the rest of their life anyway. But with girls, because they're just that much better than we are, the difficulty is reining them in. So good luck, I say.
Thank you.
No, she'll be marvelous. And also you will be absolutely unable to discipline her at all. I can promise you that.
That will start this time next week, so I can't wait.
Oh God, mate. No, that's it. Brilliant. I'm really pleased. I didn't know she was expecting. That'll be. You're gonna have a brilliant Christmas. That'll be awesome.
Well, fingers crossed. But on to you, David.
Yes.
I mean, let's get straight into it, because you know how to hook a reader right from the start, which is something you're known for with your fiction work. But I mean, Peace of Mind is no different in that regard, because the book opens with a pretty hard-hitting paragraph, to say the least, which I'm going to read now, so please don't sue me. Okay. It starts, "For as long as I can remember, I've wanted to stop being alive. Not die, necessarily, but definitely cease to be. It seems the sensible thing to do. Everything's dreadful, after all, and it's always struck me as substantially less terrifying than the alternative, which is to carry on existing and feeling like this, or worse, until the universe eventually relents and grants the sweet release of merciful oblivion." Now, I think those are going to be hard words for anyone to hear or read. And I know you're doing that writer thing there of hearing your words read back to you, which I know well. But I mean, as somebody who calls you a friend and loves you dearly, it is particularly harrowing to see those words written down and to read them out. But I mean, for those.
So I was going to say, that's one of the strange things, actually, is the things that have been so obvious to me about me, discovering that other people have been
I've always thought you're a miserable git anyway, but there we
go. That's the trouble, is that you have this, you know, you've got to think of yourself as a pint of Guinness, really, and I've got, you know, this deep lying dark sediment inside me.
You've been to my local then.
and then people like kind of judge you on the quality of the froth. And my froth's always been quite good quality. You know, I can do glibness and superficiality, and I can do entertaining pretty well. But you know, I've always thought of myself as the guy who's at the bottom of the glass. So yeah, the book is very much about saying, you know, look past the froth. This is what it is.
The tears of the clown.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's a truism. You know, we think of cliches as something to avoid as a writer, but they're not, because they are emblems.
There's a reason they're there. They sum it up perfectly. Why try to reinvent the wheel?
Exactly. No, there's a
if you want another
truth.
cliche.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, but without cliche and Shakespeare, where would the English language be? That's the question. But yeah, I mean, look, you know, you've been privy to my occasional brushes with the beyond. You know, I mean, the last time when I fell off the wagon about 18 months ago, you know, you were one of a few people who, you know, reached out and said, you know, I'm here for you. And those moments are the ones that really matter to you. And those are the moments that save your life.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's I kind of felt as though there was a responsibility to explain, not explain myself, but explain my illness, I guess. So here we are.
Well, I mean, don't feel the need to explain anything, but we're very grateful you do. For those of you for those listening who don't know you and perhaps aren't aware of the conditions that you are living with and that you're talking about, it might sound like a bit of an inside joke, perhaps, for when we're talking about between us without actually saying what on earth is wrong with you. Perhaps tell us a little bit about David Mark, about the conditions that you live with.
Well, I'm severely bipolar, which used to be called manic depression. I still think it's a better description. I'm an alcoholic. I've got an addictive personality. I've got obsessive compulsive disorder. I have auditory and visual hallucinations. I have anxiety, chronic anxiety at times, and essentially, you know, if you take away all of my different disorders, I don't quite know what's left as personality.
I was going to say, apart from that, you're all right.
Yeah, apart from that, I'm absolutely grand. And it's not actually recognised as a thing anymore. But I also have what they used to call in Victorian psychiatry delusions of grandeur.
Oh.
Which is, you know, we use that as a joke, but it's actually something that I also suffer with. So I'm the full mixed bag of not well. If I'm honest, the biggest thing is the depression. Depression is the thing that if they found a pill for everything else, the depression would still be there. You know,
do you think that's caused by a lot of the other issues as well? Perhaps
I'm fascinated by cause and effect when it comes to depression, because the reason that I know that what I have is medical and pathological is because when my life has been peaches and cream, when everything has been absolutely going in the right direction, I have been excruciatingly low. I've yearned for the end more than at any other time. Whereas bizarrely, when life is horrific, circumstantially, those are the moments when I've actually got more fight, more resolve, and more willingness to keep going. So I'm aware that what I have is kind of a deep down issue. But I've always thought it'd be quite funny if depression was airborne and you caught it like flu, because then people might be a bit more sympathetic to what people go through. But I don't know. I don't think there's any set of circumstances that would change the chemical makeup of my mind. But I do think that, I don't know. Put it this way: the depression is as masquerades as your friend, to the point that you'd almost be reluctant to lose it because it's so much a part of your thought process. So that's possibly why the thing that I think I'll never be shot of depression, because to be shot of that, you wonder what you'll spend your time thinking about, what you'll spend your time feeling. But yeah, the other things are things that I've picked up. They are stuck on to the depression, but the depression is there forever, possibly.
Well, I think that when we talk about mental illness, I think that most people would probably accept that terms like mental illness can be a bit misleading in some ways, because it covers so many completely different conditions which manifest in so many ways, as you've just covered there. And I think
we've got very odd visuals when it comes to phrases like mentally ill. Even I do. You think of somebody mentally ill, you think of somebody who's banging the head against a wall in a rubber room. And the daft thing is that a lot of the people who are walking around doing a job or trying to do a job in other times, or with a society that could afford to deal with people who are struggling with their mental health, they would actually be in a safe place. They would be actually being taken care of. But because there is no societal safety net at all, you just keep going. You just keep getting on with it. So somebody could be severely mentally ill, but they're just stood at the bus stop next to you.
Yeah, you see statistics. I think it's 1 in 3 people, they say, suffer from serious depression at some point in their lives, or X.
Well, 75% rise in instances of mania during lockdown. 75%. I mean, look, it depends how deep you want to go into the human condition, but we're not set up for the lives that we live. Human beings we've been forced into an uncomfortable jacket that doesn't suit us and doesn't fit us.
Sometimes I think living in a cave and just hunting and foraging would be ideal, as you say.
Oh, completely.
Everything else that's been added on is sometimes far too much. But I mean, the statistics about how many people live with mental illness, there are numbers here and numbers there, but the reality is those are the people that we actually know about. Because I think personally, one of the reasons at times I'm a bit uncomfortable with terms like mental illness is because I believe that we all either have had or will have some form of mental illness, in the same way we've all either been physically ill, we currently are, or we will be, because no one is a perfect picture of health. But mental conditions, I think, can be far more difficult to spot, especially when you're the one living with them, because your brain can often try convincing you everything is perfectly normal. So I'm interested in finding out a little bit about how your conditions first manifested themselves and how you first spotted them, and what were the first signs? What was the wake up call for you?
Well, I don't really remember a time before depression and mental illness were words that were bandied around in my household, because my dad was a sufferer, like chronically depressed, and that right to the edge, kind of depressed. So it was explained to me at like 9, 10 years old that my dad, got so sad and so glum that he didn't want to live, or he didn't want to get out of bed, or didn't want to be. And that's not a nice thing to know, because you think, well, I must be able to fix that. You're taught that if somebody's sad, you're nice to them, you give them a hug, or you buy them a little gift to cheer them up, and they'll get better. They'll get over what it is that's causing them sadness, and then you discover that it's fundamental. That's what they're living at the moment. They're wrapped in this damp towel of absolute despair, and that's quite a lot to take on board when you're a kid. So when I started to feel similar things at 11 and 12, that this nihilistic absolute pointlessness of existence, it became quite clear that so it was said quite a lot. Well, you're just like your dad. So it wasn't that much of a surprise. The tricky bit was when I started seeing things that weren't there. That's not what you're after really when you're 12 or 13 and you're the kid who plays clarinet at quite a tough comprehensive. You're already getting picked on for being about a good foot shorter than everybody else, and when you think,
we are
brilliant.
very similar, aren't we?
Yeah. You think, brilliant. Just what I need is I need to be attacked by a swarm of bats as I'm walking through the school gates that aren't actually there. Oh, brilliant. I need to be sat in the classroom and see death standing in the corner, just looking at me, and yeah, things like that that make you seem so mad, just so utterly off your head. It's quite a scary thing to have to go home and say to the people who love you, yeah, I'm seeing weird stuff, and I don't really want to be alive, because if you've got parents who love you, which I'm very fortunate that I do, they want to solve your problems. They want to help you. They want to give you good advice, and they want to take away your circumstantial problems. But the circumstantial problems don't really make that much of an impact to your state of mind. I could have a great day at school and be walking home from school and fall into a despair like no other because I thought, well, that's it, I've peaked. It's how can I replicate this tomorrow? How can I make sure that the things that I was terrified of happening today won't happen tomorrow? Right. Well, I'll make sure that I wear the same clothes. I'll make sure that I keep the rubbish that's in my pockets in my pockets. I'll make sure that I look at the number on that house as I walk past it, and then stop and do something that makes me feel self-conscious. But that act of doing something that's ritualistic will give me the comfort to deal with what's coming ahead. And the next minute you've got OCD on top of everything else, and you go through your teenage years in this state of trying to control the uncontrollable, terrified of things that might happen, while making yourself extraordinarily miserable about the things that probably won't. And then you've got people at the same time telling you that you've got all these skills, that you've got a wonderful imagination, that you can write, you can talk, you've got talent, you've got such a great future ahead of you, and you almost think like, well, that's brilliant. Could we go there now? Could you put me into this future where I'm better and my life is better and I'm more equipped for it? And oh no, you've got to go through several years of horror before you even get anything close to that. Well, could we just not then? Could we just knock it on the head? Could we just tell you what? I'll kill myself near somebody who would value this more, and then my talent might flow into them. How about that? And these are literally, I know how mad it sounds, but these are the thought processes that were in my head from the age of about 12 or 13 through to, now. And so in answer to that question, when did you first become aware of it? It was quite clear early on that I wasn't particularly like the way other kids my age manifested. And when I try and find similar ground with kids and say, do you ever do this? Do you ever do that? No, we don't do that. So really finding common ground with other people started when I was like 16, 17, and I've met more of the artsy crowd, shall we say? People who were, yes, the people whose soul was slightly too big for their body, and tended to dress a little bit more unusually, just as a sort of, I don't know, trying to find something, some search for meaning. So yeah, when I gravitated towards that particular crowd and discovered that, people who listen to The Cure are much more likely to experience these things than the people that you've been at school with, who were quite happy listening to whatever the opposite of The Cure is, probably the disease. It was, that was when I started realising, okay, so there are lots of people out there, but they're writing, and they're writing music, and they're drawing, they're artists, and they're people in the theatre. And, okay, well, I'll hang about with these people. And, that was kind of from that point forward, I knew that I certainly wasn't alone.
Well, you're very honest about the people you know with similar conditions and your family situation as well. You obviously you've mentioned your father having his own struggles, and you talk in the book as well about your partner Nicola's conditions. She has BPD, borderline personality disorder, ADHD as well, a condition I know a lot about. But does that make things harder? Because lots of people close to you are living with their own struggles, or I get the sense from talking to you just now and hearing you then that perhaps it makes it somehow easier because of a kind of mutual understanding, perhaps?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to remember that there's always the thought versus feeling debate is always one that it's very prevalent in our house, because the things you think about, you make good, conscious, cognitive decisions about the right way to behave, what to do, who you want to be, how you want to be, how we solve this problem, and things like that. And they go out the window as soon as feelings raise their head, because they're a deeper, more primal instinct. But Nicola and I, we've taken several years to reach something like an equilibrium where I can recognise what is her and what is her illness, and she, tries to extend me the same courtesy, I guess you'd call it, where she knows that that what I'm doing or saying or feeling or being isn't necessarily representative of what the person who's in love with her is thinking and feeling and being, but it is what my illness is doing to me today. So we certainly have that level of empathy and understanding. And also we have the ability to see when those little precursors to a bad episode are starting to raise their head a little bit. So we try and take steps to cut that off at the pass. The difficulty is when we're fine. We seem as though we're doing okay, and something happens that irritates or causes us difficulty, and we both have this fear that that's going to lead to a monumental collapse in the other. Because a lot of mental illness manifests just like what we think of as being grumpy or tired or just down in the dumps. And it's okay to be down in the dumps. It really is. Everybody has days where you just can't face it, or you're impatient, or you just don't, you feel overburdened by reality. And the difficulty when you're with somebody who's got extreme mental illness is that is allowing people the freedom to have that, while being terrified that it's going to be a step towards a mental collapse. So those are the rather peculiar issues that we face as a couple. Is that sometimes I'm just having a crap day, and I'm sat quietly in the corner because I want to sit quietly in the corner and just refocus. But she's terrified that I'm in the midst of a despair and I'm going to fall off the wagon and go and chuck myself off something. And similarly, she'll get ratty, and I'll be like, oh God, here we go. We're going to have a massive BPD flare up here, and I'll be running around making tea, biscuits, and plumping up cushions. And really, what she needs is half an hour on her own to just calm down as well. So
just a general bad day sometimes.
Just a general bad day. So you're on. It's quite hard to live in that hypervigilance is actually quite exhausting in its own right. But those are just parts of the life that we've chosen, I guess. But I would say it's certainly easier being with somebody who understands how it is to be almost a slave to your own worst instincts. That makes it a little bit more. There's more understanding. But it still doesn't mean you get away with anything.
No, I mean, we're talking of other people. There's actually a chapter in the book called Aren't You Better Yet, which is it's aimed at people who are trying to. I guess you're talking to people who are living with those or know those who are living with depression and other conditions, and it talks about how most people actually are really completely useless when it comes to saying or doing the right things. I mean, I could go on all day about why phrases like "man up" are not only unhelpful but highly offensive and actually do a huge amount to perpetuate the problem of people not wanting to seek help or talk about illness, making out to be a weakness. But I mean, you put it so brilliantly in the book, which I'm going to read out this section again and hope that I still don't get sued. I'm probably pushing my luck now.
I'll forgive you.
So probably best not to say, you say, we all get down sometimes. You can't carry on like this. This is getting a bit much. You really need to take a good look at yourself. You're just like everybody else. Look what this is doing to the people who love you. And you say, that last one is the worst. In the wrong head, it's permission, nay, a positive instruction to remove yourself from the lives of your loved ones by jumping off something high and slitting a vein before hitting the ground. Now, it's a very difficult thing to explain to somebody who hasn't been there or isn't there. And I don't know what's caused that sort of approach in people, but I find it's often quite telling when people seem to believe you can just talk somebody out of their illness, perhaps in the same way you can tell someone with a broken leg to walk it off, or asking your friend if they've ever considered maybe just not having lung cancer. And I mean, of course, having a loved one with mental illness will affect people around them, but so do those other conditions. And I think having a relative with cancer or cerebral palsy or something, I mean, that's not much fun either. But there isn't this undercurrent of guilt thrown at those conditions.
Well, that's the thing. Even it's about feeling like a burden. And I think everybody, mental illness notwithstanding, I think everybody knows what it feels like to be a burden, to be a nuisance. The difficulty is when you suffer with a mental illness is that you're constantly looking for reasons that will permit you to do what you want to do, which is not live. And if you're using every last scrap of fight to just keep breathing, to just not do that thing that there's a voice whispering to you to do, when somebody says to you, look what you're doing to the people that you love, however well intentioned, you as somebody certainly with my mentality, I look for symbolism all the time. I look for signs. I look for and I can read a whole lot of meaning into that one well-intentioned platitude, and that just basically means all this fight, all this effort, all of this the things that you're putting into this that are draining you to the point where you've got nothing left. It's not worth it. You don't need to do it anymore because you're still doing this to your family despite your best effort. So, that puts a lot of burden on the person who to not say these things, because it does come from a good place. But you've got to think about the person who you're saying it to.
I think, would you say it to somebody with a physical illness, with somebody living with cancer or cerebral palsy or something like that? Would you say those things? Because I think treating mental illnesses differently from physical illnesses can be the problem. I mean, people do rally around; they try to do what they can to help support you, and
Well, there seems almost a burden to articulate your pain. That other types of illness wouldn't be required. I wouldn't write a 50,000 word memoir about how having a broken leg feels, because bloody sore. That's how it feels. I've written the memoir largely because I don't think that a lot of people understand how this feels. And if you want to understand it, this is the book that says this is how it feels. And if you do understand it, hopefully this is the book that says, well, this is how I feel. Is it anything like this? And I think that hopefully there's some sort of help to be had in shared experience. That was kind of the motivation behind it all. But yeah, I mean, people ask me often, what should I say? What should I say to somebody who I love who is going through this horror? And I suppose the only thing I've ever been said to me that's really helpful is Take as much time as you need. I'll always be here. That's really it. Yeah, the
same as you say to somebody with a physical illness.
Yeah. Of course, you're not a burden. I love you. That's there's a reason that, for example, wedding vows, they are what they are. It's because we understand that life does come with richer for poorer, for sickness and in health. That the span of a life will have its ups and downs, and my downs are really, really down.
But something I was going to ask about, actually. Sorry to sort of cut you off mid-flow.
No,
but,
please.
One of the things I did want to, I guess, not for dramatic effect and not to try and make a sensation out of things, but just out of, I guess, sheer interest and highlighting how bad things can get. How bad has it got? What has rock bottom looked like for you?
Oh, I've had my I've thought I've hit rock bottom many a time, only to find that actually somebody's it's like, well, I think I say in the book, it's like you're out to hit the ground after jumping off a building and somebody opens a manhole cover and you find that there's actually a whole new layer. But yeah, I mean, look, put it this way, I'm working hard on my third bankruptcy at the moment. I've found myself, absolute, like 3 or 4 bottles of whiskey down in the woods, no memory of how I've got there, no sense of anything other than the fact that there are things trying to get me, and just absolute mania, absolute despair, to the point that if anybody had said to me, take this pill, you'll stop. You'd ask for another one for dessert, and then the only option is to stay there until somebody finds you and helps you, and how do you help you? Or you put yourself back together and you walk home. And I've been there, I've had that walk home. And then you think to yourself, right, I'm going to think cinematically. I'm going to have my Rocky moment. I'm going to get up and I'm going to beat the 10 count and I'm going to fight this. I'm going to be better. And you can't will yourself better. All you can do is get in touch with your GP, and your GP will refer you to somebody. And then 11 months from then, you might get to talk to somebody. So,
by which point you can't remember the situation
anyway.
Yeah,
well, we live in a society where essentially, they understand suicide is dreadful, but also we haven't got anybody to help you. So the idea that you can ring somebody and say my partner is going to kill themselves, and that they'll send somebody to help. They don't. I mean, we've got numbers for the crisis team, but even then, you get through somebody 30 miles away, who say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think they are to do it? It's utterly absurd. And then you've almost got this self-defeating situation where you feel suicidal. You've told somebody I feel suicidal. And then you think, well, if I don't go through with it, they're going to think I was making it up. And these are the stupid swirl of thoughts that when you come out the other side, you look back with shame and bewilderment and think, oh my God, was I really that close to the edge because of this absurd thought? But that thought is so pronounced in the moment. I mean, this is what people say. People don't seem to realise when people actually have gone through with a suicide. Is that they were feeling suicidal in that moment. If you could have saved their life for another 5 minutes, if you could have saved life for another 5 minutes after that, you're creating space for that worst excesses of suicidal ideation to pass. Saving somebody just for now might create the space for them to get a little better. Which is for me why every single suicide is an absolute tragedy. And the idea that it's somehow a coward's way out is repugnant to me. It's just somebody who's succumbed to their illness. So yeah, it's be fair to say that we have those moments.
It all comes down to that weakness thing, doesn't it? That people think about. Well, I mean, it's even if it's not right there at the front of people's thoughts, even, I mean, going back to physical illnesses, people talk about fighting cancer.
Oh
What
yeah,
happens if you die? Have you just not fought hard enough? Does that
well,
mean
that's the thing.
you're weak? Because it's all
There are
this
some people who've
weakness,
got
isn't
this.
it?
Yeah, they think of succumbing to an illness as like a character flaw. Uh, and
Man up
I mean,
again. These things all
oh,
it's all this I don't know, just this obsession with people being weak if they don't just man up and get on with it.
absolutely. Well, there's this idea that you've got to be stoic. I mean, I really struggle now as somebody, I'm from a certain, I won't say a rough background because that's not fair on my parents, but I went from a fairly down at heel area,
Do you mean the
and
north?
yeah, let's call it the north, yeah.
Yeah.
And I find myself constantly trying to work out what to hold up as a noble ideal because I have strength of character. I will fight for what I love. I will fight for what I believe in. I do hold myself strong in the face of the prevailing winds of misfortune. And as a consequence of that, my inner life is incredibly bleak, dark, and unhappy. Uh, and I'm told, societally, I'm told that what I should do is ask for help, and I should cry when I feel like crying, and I should show weakness, and again, that's the watchword, isn't it? I should show how hard I'm finding it. And the consequence to that is that people no longer see you as a strong person. People no longer see you as a capable person. And being capable is something that I've always held up to as an ideal. One of the things I'm proudest of is the fact that despite everything, I'm still here. I'm still doing what needs to be done. I'm still my children are provided for, and I'm I am the thing I set out to be. I'm a relatively successful novelist, but that's the difficulty is that when you have opened up and you feel almost duped by it, because there are people out there who then will use that as a sign that you are less of a person. And I certainly struggle with that. Every time now that I'm sober and on the right medication and talking to a therapist every Friday, now I can cry the drop of a hat, and I still feel like I'm a big baby, uh, because I'm a guy. I'm a northern man in his 40s, and it's impossible for me to imagine somebody looking at that and finding it attractive or finding it reassuring.
I don't know. I think you're a very good-looking guy, David. For those of us, for those of our Patreon subscribers who are watching us on the video, might notice a certain likeness in some ways. Visually speaking.
I've got to be honest. I'm liking this mirror that I'm looking in. To be honest, you've given me much. I've got a lot fewer lines, and I look positively more well groomed in my reflection. So
it's all lighting.
That works
It's
well
all lighting. Well, I mean, in the book, you talk about how you keep thinking one day everything is going to be brilliant, that you'll get better, which is it's a very positive thing to read. But at the same time, I've got to admit, it's also kind of slightly heartbreaking, especially when you consider that things will, I guess, unavoidably rise up again, or the inevitable ebbs and flows of mental illness mean there'll be times when it does get worse for a while. But I mean, do you find that optimism to be something that helps you, or are there times when you think actually having an acceptance of what this is, accepting there will be more dark times, can help frame things more realistically, maybe make the downturns more acceptable, or would it actually put you in a position where it would allow that to breed and manifest? I don't know. I'm kind of interested to hear your take. How much control you have over that.
There's a phrase that people are bandying about a lot now, that this too shall pass, and that is essentially what Nicola and I, we cling to during the darkest times, is that what we're feeling is temporary, and that, like, literally can't stay dark forever. The worst excesses of our condition will lift at some point. But all I can liken it to is grief. In that you lose somebody that you love and you grieve, and people tell you that it will, that the time will heal it to some degree. So, all right, fine. What do I do in the meantime? How do I live? How do I function? How do I cope while waiting for this extraordinary rain to stop falling on me? Those are the difficulties. It's all very well telling yourself that this too will pass, but sometimes it feels as though it's taking its bloody time. But the best thing I can do essentially is to really value the times when I'm feeling good. Sort of absorb that. And I mean, I think of it as like storing it in a camel's hump for the drought that'll come. But I mean, I'm so familiar with my illness that essentially I make it. I try not to even when I'm feeling utterly wretched. I try not to alter my day-to-day responsibilities and duties and requirements because I know that way really, really dark times lay. That level of exhaustion, that desire to pull the bed covers over your head and just tune out. Have this it's almost like a mini death. This just opt out completely. That is so intoxicating a proposition. But I also know it'll be worse for me. All I would do is lay there, with that silent weeping where you don't sob, it just tears leak as if somebody stepped on a sponge.
I think it was quite telling where you likened it to a death and to grieving. And I think, yeah, even when things are then getting better, I think having that acceptance that at some point you will hear that song or you will see that photograph and there will be resurgences. I think having that acceptance of it, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, I'm incredibly fortunate in that I have this job. I'm a writer, and writing saves my life every day. And thinking about writing, because if nothing else, I mean, it probably isn't emotionally healthy. I don't know, but the act of creating makes me feel better, and putting what I experience and what I feel into my stories and into my characters. That is a safer place for it than in me. So I mean, I'll tell you, it's in the book as you've seen, but I was on the literally. It sounds silly when I say it out loud, but I was on my way to go and essentially not exactly chuck myself off something, but to go and stand on something high and see what happened. And I had a good idea for a story. I had an idea for a novel, and it became so important that this novel be written that I turned around and went home and wrote it. And that became the foundation of what became my first book. So, this duty to storytelling, this duty to fiction, to the importance of creativity and producing something that will outlast me was sufficiently, it was everything to me. And I just thought to myself, it'd be so ungrateful of me to have this brilliant idea and then just think, well, and do something as selfish as kill myself, when I could be sat at my desk and bringing this story to life for millions of readers around the world who will experience this and know that, that I had this great idea on this day. And it's bizarre. Every time people pick up a book and read something by me, that my storytelling career began because I thought to myself, who would be walking to their death on this night at this time, and why would they be doing so? And that became a character, and that character became a story, and the story became a novel, and the novel became a career. So it's really strange how almost everything that I have I can owe to being at this absolute bottom of the pitch, shall we say? So it's very, very strange when I look back. And obviously people talk about how this memoir is really, really open and honest and must make me feel vulnerable and things. And bizarrely enough, it doesn't, because it was always there. As far as I was concerned, it was always so clear. It was always quite obvious that I was only ever putting on a show, but the show was so authentic that people presumed I was all right. And then you got people who were saying to you, "I had no idea, I had no idea," and I'd be like, "How could you have had no idea?" Like, well, because you didn't say anything. You didn't say anything. And I was like, "Yeah, but surely you could just tell." Like, well, why did no? How could we just tell? And that's been a very interesting thing for me, is discovering that, God, if people didn't realise I was like this, and for me it was absolutely there for anybody to see, how many people out there are really like this now and too frightened to say anything or too ashamed to say anything? I'll tell you this. I was once at the theatre, and there was a lady who'd come to see the same show, and she was on her own, and she sat next to me. And I turned to her, and I don't know whether you believe in auras and like a life force and energies and things like that. But I turned to her, and she just absolutely, it was like there was a darkness all around us with just absolute woe and grief and sadness. And I couldn't help myself. I literally just said, "Well, are you okay?" And she just burst into tears and started sobbing, just absolutely sobbing. And she was just saying, "I can't go on." And I found myself in this bizarre situation of talking to this stranger about, and you know, you almost want to say the usual questions like, "Well, what's happened? You know, what change in your circumstances has precipitated this state of affairs?" Whereas I know full well that doesn't have to be a catalyst. You just get there. And as it was, I missed the first half of the show and went out and just basically spoke to her, and she just, just sobbed, and then she went home, and I never saw her again. And I don't know whatever happened to her, but I know that she's just one person out there who's walking around holding in this extraordinary ocean of tears. And these people who say, "Oh, don't be nice to me or I'll cry," they're holding on, by their fingertips, and they're the people who need something. What that something is, I can't honestly say. But how do you wave a magic wand and make people more compassionate? How do you make people more empathic? How do you make people care about one another to the degree that is required? Society can't fix that overnight. But as an individual, you can listen, you can notice, you can not be fobbed off. A lot of people, if you're suicidal, you almost reward yourself for fobbing somebody off, because the last thing you want to do is to hear what they're saying. The last thing you want is them to talk you out of it, because you've already made this decision that, I'm better off out of it. So it's a bloody nuisance if somebody realises that you're in this place, comes and talks you down. But you've got to push. So the people might not thank you for it in the moment, but if you want somebody who you fear is in this state of mind, if you want them to be the best version of their own soul that they can have, that more wellness than sadness in their future, then you've got to let them know that you're there for them without judgment. It's the fear of the judgment that's the hardest part. The idea of because you pitch your mind forward into the inevitability of the conversation, and you can imagine them saying things to you, and you can imagine how awful those things will feel. So you don't want them to have to go through it, and you don't want to hear it. So you think, "I'll avoid it," and avoidance just keeps you in that same place as well. I mean, I wouldn't encourage you to spend 30 years not talking about it and then write a memoir. that's kind of right. That is properly ripping the band-aid off, isn't it? And saying, "Look, this is me." But yeah, it's.
But you have, and I'm sure it will help not only you but a lot of other people. For me, and I'm sure for a lot of people listening who love your books, it's very encouraging as well to know that writing is one of the things that saves you and keeps you going. So hopefully that means we've got lots more David and Mark books.
Oh yeah, I promise my counsellor this every Friday when she says, "No, do you plan on killing
your accountant?"
Good God!
Don't worry, I will write more books.
I've got accountants chasing me across the country. No, I tell my counsellor every Friday when she asks, "Do you plan to kill yourself in the next 7 days?" I always say the same thing, which is, I will never kill myself. I've made that plain. Doesn't mean that I don't want to. And that is a strange mentality to live within, especially when people see you and you're sat by the river with your daughter, you know, doing a little play about doing the different ducks' voices, and you're living this moment that's absolutely full of these glorious, radiant moments of something close to bliss. And you think to yourself, well, all I can do is appreciate the bliss, and hope that sustains you when the despair arrives. But the daft thing is that you speak to most people with depression, and they wouldn't wish it away. They would just make it. They just wish that it wasn't quite so brutal. You know, it'd be lovely if you could just say, well, I'll feel depressed at the weekend when I've got time. But it doesn't work that way. But I've got to be honest that I've never had a response like this to anything I've written before. You know, the amount of people who I love and admire and respect, and other writers and readers all over the place, you know, literally taking the time to message me and say that this helped them understand, or this was the closest thing they ever felt to reading something that mirrored their own experience. That's tremendously gratifying. And when somebody said that, when there was a reviewer who said that they think it will save lives, you don't really get, as a writer, the idea that it's a life-saving occupation doesn't really enter your head. But what an amazing thing! You know, I have literally one gift. I can write. That's it. But I can write how things feel, and that's what I've done. So it certainly seems to be resonating. I'd love to be able to say I could write a self-help book where, you know, I can actually say this is a practical, proactive book that helps you out of your depressive funks. But I don't have that. I don't know if there are any skills that will help that. I think there's a very good industry built up around that. A lot of people have made a lot of money out of that. But that's not what I can do. All I can say is this is how I feel.
Well, I would highly recommend that people buy all of your books, frankly, because I love them. You are an extraordinarily talented man. But the one that we're talking about today, and that people should definitely read, it will be a book that changes your life. It will be a book that makes you look at things very, very differently, whether there's something that's affected you personally, or whether just hearing David talk today has made you think you want to find out more. It's Peace of Mind by David Mark. We'll have links in the show notes, and we'll push it on our social media and bits and bobs as well over the coming weeks. Well, David, thank you very much for talking to us and allowing Partners in Crime to be your therapist on a Monday instead of a Friday this week. It's appreciated, mate. It is appreciated what you do for writers as well. You know, the writers tend to be decent people by and large, so it's appreciated that you put yourself out there as a sounding board for other people's difficulties. But no, it is genuinely much appreciated. Well, it's a pleasure, and hopefully we'll speak to you again soon when you've got another book out. Excellent. Take care, mate. Cheers, David.
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft.
Not the other one.
And produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Beisch. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.